Modes like rail.
Less than 1%.
Rail, we don't do at all. We don't look at whatsoever. We don't know what comes in via train. Again, we don't have the infrastructure. Wow. We don't have the people to actually do that work.
Okay, so Canada has been wanting answers. Why are our borders not secure? What's going on? Whose fault is it? How are so many things crossing into Canada illegally that are causing harm to Canadians? Who do we blame? And now we have an admission of guilt. The CBSA, quite literally, goes on television and admits, hey, yeah, sorry, we haven't really been able to do our job properly. But that's not because we can't. That's just because we're understaffed and underfunded. Anyways, do with this information as you will. Yep, that's a real interview, as I'm sure you saw from the intro. So we're going to be talking about that later in the video. We're also going to be talking about a couple of other stories, such as Fiji. Yeah, not the water, but the place. Fiji has a bone to pick with Canada. You see, Fiji is having a climate crisis, and the only people that can fix it is Canada. You can't make this up. So I highly recommend you guys stick around for the full video because there's a lot of crazy stuff happening in the world, but also in Canada. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage you all to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It does really help grow the channel. And without further ado, let's get into today's video. I can't make this up, but there's been an awful amount of noticeable public prayer, not by Christians, in Canada. And with the rise of the Palestinian protests that are very dangerous and very chaotic taking place in Quebec, you have the Quebec premier is now issuing a statement saying that he wants to ban people from public prayer, from prayer in public spaces, which is probably going to get spun into a super progressive media tour. But this is wild. I never thought anybody in Canada had the guts to say something like this. But here we go. Let's take a look.
I think that people are a bit fed up to see that.
Premier François Legault says Quebecers should not be exposed to people praying in public. The comment came during his year-end press conference, where Legault spoke about his two main priorities, protecting the economy and protecting Quebec's identity.
We have to make sure that we protect our language and our values. And in our values, I include secularism and equality between men and women.
Legault says his government is studying all options, including using the notwithstanding clause to ban public prayers.
You should pray in a place that is for praying, but in parks, public parks or public streets, we'll look at what we can do, but that's not what we want.
Sometimes it makes me feel that he doesn't want us here.
Canadian Council of Muslim Women Vice President Shaheen Ashraf says prayer is personal and adds she doesn't understand why it makes others uncomfortable.
I'm not going to be disturbing anyone. I will just be concentrating on my prayer, which again, I will reiterate that it takes like 4 or 5 minutes, and then go about my business.
Rabbi Ruben Pupko says it hardly affects the Jewish community because prayers take place almost exclusively in a synagogue. But he believes the move is in response to protests surrounding the conflict in the Middle East.
Unfortunately, given that some groups have exploited the religious excuse for their rhetoric and for their gatherings, this is the inevitable result.
It comes on the same day Education Minister Bernard Drinville says he will table a bill to strengthen secularism in schools.
We have to look at ways to strengthen secularism into our school system to address these issues of religious behaviors.
Drinville says more cases have been brought to his attention, including another this week at St. Maxime in Laval. The Education Ministry is currently investigating 17 Quebec schools where it's alleged that state secularism is not being respected. Olivia O'Malley, CTV News, Quebec City.
Let me know what you guys think about that, because it seems like it's only a push towards certain religions. I mean, are people that do Catholic prayers in public, is that going to have the same reaction? Christian prayers? I don't think so. I don't think it's as frequent and as, I don't know how to say this, as big of a deal when it's Christians praying. It's more like in a park, that's all, hold hands and say a prayer, not literally in the middle of a road. But either, no matter how you look at it, that's what a church is for. That's what a place of worship, a temple, a church, however you want to look at it, is for. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comments about that one. Next up here, we're going to take a look at this part of Pierre Poilievre's speech that he gave the other day.
Pierre Poilievre says his team is putting Canada first in the fight against Donald Trump's tariffs.
Every single conservative would tell every single American that a tariff on Canada is a bad idea.
This weekend, Conservative MP Jamil Jivani met with Vice President-elect J.D. Vance in Washington. But Jivani didn't confirm if they talked tariffs at the dinner. In a statement writing, the Vice President-elect knows my views on these matters well. I've shared feedback from Canadian businesses and workers about the impact tariffs would have on our economy. Poilievre says he hasn't talked to anyone in the Trump administration on the issue.
I haven't.
This morning, Trump railed against his country's trade deficit with Canada, border security, and called tariffs a powerful political tool that he loved.
We're subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year. We're subsidizing Mexico for almost $300 billion. We shouldn't be subsidizing. Why are we subsidizing these countries? If we're going to subsidize them, let them become a state.
The message in stark contrast to that of the outgoing Biden administration.
This is our #1 trading relationship in the world. It is a trading relationship that is the envy of the world. And the last thing you want to do is to put things in place that make it harder.
Meanwhile, new polling shows 63% of Canadians at least partially believe Trump's tariff threats.
Donald Trump operates in a disruptive manner. That's how he tries to gain the upper advantage when it comes to negotiations and stuff like this. The big issue here is uncertainty.
We're learning more tonight about François Legault's meeting with Donald Trump in Paris yesterday. The Quebec Premier and U.S. President-elect talked tariffs and border issues. Meanwhile, Legault also met with Elon Musk to discuss U.S.-Canada trade and electric vehicles. Heather.
Colton, thank you.
I absolutely believe Mr. President Trump. I don't think that he's bluffing at all. I think that it's a very real and tangible thing that he could do. And even if it hurts Americans financially in the American economy, he's willing to lay down the hammer. He has to. He can't go back on it now. He made the threat. He's going to double down, right? 25. Did I say 25? I meant 50, right? Like, yes, we should be believing Donald Trump. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comments about that one. Next up here, we've got a poll that shows Canadians would hesitate to buy U.S. goods if tariffs go into effect. I think that with our dollar being so shite and with the additional taxes of tariffs, essentially, I think, this is a very real thing. People will not want to buy things in America. People will not want to travel as much in America.
Impacting Canadians' feelings about buying U.S. products.
CTV's Colton Prail has more on this story. Colton, good morning. Good to see you. So in the new Nano CTV poll, how are Canadians reacting to Trump's trade threat of a 25% tariff on Canadian goods?
Canadians do think that these tariffs are coming. They are taking Trump at his word, and we're seeing that play out similarly in how they plan on responding. The majority of Canadians say they're much less likely to buy American products as a result of these tariffs, about 51%, and an additional 14 say they're at least somewhat less likely to buy American products. So while these tariffs we know will have an impact on the Canadian economy and certainly on the American economy, there could be a knock-on carryover effect in consumer behavior changes that adds another little wrinkle that the Trump administration will have to consider before the imposition of these tariffs. The big question, though, is whether or not we'll see enough consumer behavior changes that line up with what they're saying in this polling. A lot of Canadians, for example, aren't always aware of which products they're buying that are made in the U.S. because there is such a large quantity that come into Canada from America, especially when it comes to fruits and vegetables and things like that.
And is our market cold and even big enough to make a dent or an impact on the American side of the equation here? But the big question, I suppose, really is, so what do Canadians think our government should be doing about these tariff threats? We've seen Trudeau, for example, go and visit Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, this is the big question. How do you deal with it? What do you do next? And so there are two different issues at play here, right? There's the border. There's also the trade deficit. You can hear Trump talking about it in his most recent interview as a subsidy. That's not really what it is. He's referring to the fact that the U.S. is importing more Canadian products than exporting to Canada. And so there's a couple ways that Canada can deal with it. They can redo the CUSMA agreement, the Canada, U.S., Mexico Free Trade Agreement, and about 1 in 2 Canadians do want to see us speed up that negotiation. It's currently set for 2026. The other thing you can do, though, is you can try to negotiate your way out of these tariffs or do retaliatory tariffs. And again,
I would not
we're talking about
that.
1 in 2 Canadians just about would prefer to see a negotiated agreement rather than going with retaliatory tariffs, where about 1/3 of Canadians would like to see us fire back. Interestingly, even though the degree of severity of the tariffs we're talking about is very different from, say, 2017 when he imposed those tariffs before, the reaction from Canadians is very, very similar. We're talking a percentage point or 2 difference in the amount of people who'd like to see us negotiate our way out versus fire back with tariffs of our own.
I do not think that Canada has enough bargaining power, enough leverage to be able to negotiate like that. I really don't. It doesn't matter if Canada is the largest exporter to America. That doesn't matter. We border America. We're protected by America until we aren't. For crying out loud, we haven't been paying our bills for the defense budget. And I've made a video about that a couple months ago or a month ago showing that Trump said, without saying Canada, he implied that it was Canada. If Russia's about to invade, we're going to look and see if they paid the bills, right? And that, of course, is talking about Canada. We've been dropping the ball in so many different ways. So, no, I don't think having retaliatory tariffs is the right response. But again, I'm not a politician. I'm just watching this just like a Canadian on the sidelines going, I don't think I want to be a part of this. I don't consent to any of this, but let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Next up, we're taking a look at this strange video. So apparently Fiji, that's right, Fiji, not the water, but the place, has nothing better to do than to say that they need Canada, of all places in the world, to help fight against the weather. That's what Fiji's saying. That's what's in this video. Let's take a look.
Province on Fiji's largest island, 300 people live in just over 40 houses along the water. It's among the many Pacific Island communities that have been dealing with the impacts of climate change, including rising sea levels.
I go out to my communities and then you see that the graveyards are washing out. And we had to forcefully relocate families because the waters are coming under their houses.
Levenia-Naivalu's island has seen a lot of changes over the decades, including many communities either already relocated or preparing to relocate. She says it hurts her to see it happening.
We are not the ones who are dumping nuclear wastes. We are not the ones who are building the tallest buildings. I mean, here we are victims of the situation, victims of climate change, victims of their wrongdoing, big people's wrongdoing. Why do we deserve it?
Canada is a contributor to the climate change impacting Fiji. This year's Climate Change Performance Index ranks Canada 62nd out of 67 countries for climate mitigation performance, making no progress from last year. As extreme weather becomes more frequent globally, it's developing countries like here in Fiji that are most affected and least able to afford consequences. With 90% of Pacific Islanders living within 5 kilometers of the coast, the impacts of climate change are an everyday reality.
The decisions agreed at the global level is...
I think that we're heading into a recession because Luxembourg. I think Luxembourg owes us a lot of money, or else we're going to head into a recession that is 100% attributed to specifically Luxembourg, not surrounding countries, but only Luxembourg. Do you understand how ridiculous what I just said is? Like, that's insane. The fact that Fiji's blaming Canada for stuff, bro, you're on the other side of the world. What are you talking about? What the hell are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. This has to, like, how much money are they getting? There's probably a government grant or something that goes to them, and then in return, in the fine print, it says all you gotta do is talk to cameras and then blame Canada, and you'll keep getting more money. And they're like, what? How does that make sense? We talk shit about your country and you give us money? Canadian government's like, yeah, that's exactly what we want you to do. That's what this feels like. This doesn't make any sense. I don't understand it. And I don't agree with it. And speaking of something I don't understand, this next story is crazy. Bananas even. So there's a Canada-wide arrest warrant issued for a former Calgary police officer. This is the first time I'm watching this blind with you. First time ever that I'm watching this news story. This is crazy. Here we go.
Words out of Chief Mark Neufeld's mouth this afternoon. Embarrassing, before going into detail about the 16-month investigation by the CPS Professional Standards section into the actions of 51-year-old Brett Singer. Now, this all started when an initial complainant came forward in July of last year, saying Singer had contacted her in a personal and romantic context after he responded to a call for service involving her. And that complainant had heard similar stories from other women before coming to police. And the alleged offenses occurred between 2008 and 2023, nearly all of Singer's 16-year tenure with the CPS. And the police says Singer inappropriately used police databases to find out how to contact the women. He was first suspended with pay in January of this year, then without pay in September, before quitting the force soon after.
The risk was assessed as high right from the beginning of receipt of this complaint, and that's why we immediately removed him from public-facing duty. We then continually assessed the evidence, and as more victims became aware to us, we escalated our restrictions on this member.
This type of behavior certainly does undermine trust and confidence with the public in a very serious way, and it does. It actually runs contrary to the work that the members of the Calgary Police Service do in the community every day, and so yes, it is demoralizing for sure.
Police believe Singer left the country soon after resigning and hasn't returned. Now, as you mentioned, he's wanted on a Canada-wide warrant on one charge of breach of trust and another charge of misuse of a computer system. And guys, given the decade-and-a-half timeline of these allegations, Chief Neufeld believes there could be more victims out there who've experienced a similar situation. Anyone who has believed they've been contacted inappropriately by Singer or any other CPS officer, for that matter, is asked to call the professional standards section.
All right. So there you go. That's kind of crazy, huh? Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments about that. That's never good when the police do big no-nos. It definitely undermines how people view the police. And in a time right now where people are just so on edge about police in general, like I used to trust the police. I used to think that they were there to serve and protect. And that's just how I grew up. And I was in the military, and I thought it was an honorable job. And that might actually still kind of be true at surface level. But when you look at how the police just follow orders and don't use critical thinking for certain things, like what happened during the most, historic peaceful protests in Canadian history, shit like that is like, yeah, I don't know if I trust the police. And then how they handle all these, out of control Palestine protests, right? That happened in like Montreal. They literally had firecrackers thrown at them and fireworks thrown at them, and they backed off in riot gear. They got beat up by just like whatever protesters. That's crazy. The police in riot gear got beat up by protesters. I don't understand it. I don't understand where policing is heading in Canada. But that's my opinion, and I'd love to know your guys's. Next up, we're going to take a look here at this clip. This is by True North. This is kind of scary. The national president of the Customs and Immigration Union, Mark Webber, reveals that the CBSA inspects less than 1% of imports. Huh. Yeah, no wonder our borders are messed up.
Let's talk about searching equipment, because we've talked about people, but I was surprised to learn, and perhaps this makes me very naive, but that the CBSA doesn't have the capacity in terms of officers or technology, for example, to search the vast majority of containers that are coming into the Port of Vancouver. And we know that's a huge fentanyl entry port. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the ability of the CBSA is to seize and investigate in particular drugs in Canada when they're coming in?
Yeah, I mean, we do have good intelligence. We work very hard at it. Again, it's simply a matter of more. We need more people. We need more equipment. We search less than 1% of what comes into Canada. Modes like rail.
Less than 1%.
Rail, we don't do at all. We don't look at whatsoever. We don't know what comes in via train. Again, we don't have the infrastructure. Wow. We don't have the people to actually do that work.
I just wanted to ask you to go back on rail. With rail, is that an inability to search just the products coming across, or is that people as well?
Could be either. Could products, people. We don't have the infrastructure to do those searches. There's plans underway to allow us to do that work on the U.S. side because there are ports where they have the infrastructure to do that. But again, that's really something Canada should be investing in.
There you go. So you're wondering why our country's, an absolute mess right now. Shit like that. That doesn't help, right? Things are slipping through the cracks. The crack is 99% wide. Less than 1% of things actually get scanned like that. See, I'm not necessarily advocating that everything should be scanned, but I feel like 1% of things that's pretty low. There's got to be a more efficient way of doing things and preserving our borders and our integrity here in Canada. Like, people can literally just ship things into this country and it's fine. It's not fine. It's illegal. Things that they shouldn't, but it happens and they can get away with it because it might not actually get caught. So no matter how much, TV programs Canada likes to, invest money in, like, I don't know what that TV show is called, Border Patrol or something, where you literally see like CBSA officers at the Canadian-US border and they're just watching people arrive from Jamaica, like stoned out of their mind, something like that. And then they go through the bags, like whatever that show is called. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Stuff like that. Like, this doesn't mean anything. You can watch a show, but in reality, we just heard from one of the guys himself saying, yeah, we're really dropping the ball. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comments about that one. Next up, we're going to take a look here at Ontario. The Premier of Ontario, Premier Ford, some people are actually speculating that he's going to call an election this spring. 'Tis the season of elections, right? That's some good news.
Politicians at Queen's Park are abuzz with speculation that Premier Doug Ford will call an early election. Well, there are several signs that Ford wants to send Ontarians to the polls before the next scheduled election in June of 2026. Well, some say the government's fast tracking of several bills is an indication it wants to clear the legislative decks before a spring election. Others point to the year-end deadline Ford gave his caucus members to decide if they'll run for re-election. Well, there's also the more than $103 million spent on government ads in the last fiscal year, more than 3 times the year before. Well, joining us live now with more on the growing speculation of an early election is CTV political commentator Scott Reid. Always great to chat, Scott. Given all those indications and things that I just mentioned, what's your take on this? You think he'll call an early election?
Oh, I think we're going to get the strangest Christmas present under the tree this year, Ontario voters. I think Premier Ford is going to deliver an election probably at the end of February for early April. And you laid out a whole ton of clues, Jamie. I'll give you 2 more. Polls in Ontario and polls federally. The polls federally show that the Prime Minister is running 20 to 25 points behind. What does that mean? It means that there's a reasonable fear that notwithstanding his protests that he's going to stay in place, at some point he might quit. Doug Ford doesn't want to run against anyone other than Justin Trudeau. He doesn't want to run against Pierre Poilievre. He doesn't want to run against Marit Stiles. He doesn't want to run against Bonnie Crombie. He wants to run against the least popular politician in the country. He wants to run against Justin Trudeau. And if he's going to do it, he's got to get it in quick. Second poll number that we should pay attention to, the Premier's own numbers, running about 43%. And the opposition is dead even split between the Liberals and the NDP. Liberals running around 25, NDP at 21. That is the perfect recipe for a majority re-election campaign. And the Premier wants to bank that result before there's any chance it could go away.
Well, you've been a strategic advisor and a political advisor. I mean, it seems that all the signs are there that there's blood in the water. So does it just make sense to pounce while all of these ducks are in a row?
Here's the risk. Here's the risk, and it's not to be turned your back on. The risk is that voters will conclude Doug Ford is calling an election very early, not because it's in their interest, but because it's in his interest. Not because he wants to do something for voters, but because he wants voters to do something for him. And that can be a cancerous logic if you're looking to get reelected. So he's got to worry about that risk. He's got to worry that he just looks like he's being self-interested. And I think for Ford, that means he's going to have to start to lay track. Maybe as early as this news conference today, when he's going to get asked about this, he's going to have to start to lay track as to why an election might be necessary. What would cause it to go to the polls? What would cause the government to go to the polls? And it can't just be because he thinks he can get reelected. That's the risk for him. But on balance, man, it looks good. You want to strike while the iron's hot.
Well, he's also, started to delve into municipal issues that have upset, some portion of the electorate. But there are a lot of people that are fully supportive of him going in and telling Toronto, you can't put in that bike lane or you can't have that supervised drug injection site. And that's sitting well with some people. But when he starts floating around massive, huge ideas like building a tunnel under the 401, I'm wondering what's your take on this? How do you think that's going to sit with people? Because given the disaster,
they should absolutely do that. For the most part, I guess I could say I was actually raised in Toronto. I lived in Toronto a good part of my adult life. And I mean, the traffic was bad then and it's horrible now. I see videos now. And if and when I actually go back and I visit, I got lots of friends and family that still live in Toronto. And it's an absolute mess. It's a disaster. I mean, we see it all the time in videos that circulate online. But for those that are actually experiencing it, it is just a shit show. You live on one side of Toronto and you got to commute to the other side and you got a vehicle. Man, you're talking like you're spending a quarter of your life in a vehicle just traveling from and to work. Like, it's insane. So building a tunnel, yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very expensive though. It's going to be very expensive. I mean, is it going to topple any of the other infrastructure? I don't know. I think Toronto's a mess. So, like, Toronto wasn't designed to like the infrastructure for it. It's not keeping up. The actual pillars of Toronto, the pipes, the sewer, everything. It wasn't designed to have this rapid of a growth. And so everything was built a long time ago. Right? All the sewers, all the piping, all of that stuff. And where they are now with a super huge surge in population. I mean, it's an absolute disaster. That's why you're seeing all these floods happen, right? And they're like, oh my God, climate change. No, the drains, bro. The drains are not working properly. The drains are not working. I feel like I'm in an episode of Seinfeld. The drains, Jerry, the drains. Come on. So should they build a tunnel? I mean, sure, why not? Give them a tunnel. Give them a tunnel under the 401.
Disaster that we've been going through with the with Metro links and just the overall gridlock. Do you think people will have the appetite for a big grand project like that?
Yeah, I think the Magic Tunnel might have been a bit of an improvisation. I'm not sure we'll hear a ton about that again. But look, whether it's picking fights with municipal leaders over safe injection sites and bike lanes, or whether it's barging into the federal agenda, talking about Trump and tariffs, I think both of those are actually clues, again, that the premier intends to run, because both of those are issues where he thinks he can align himself with the majority of voters, at least for sure a majority of his voters. And so I look at those situations, I look at those issues, and I see hints that the premier is trying to use those issues as justification for an election call in late February, as compared to worries that maybe he shouldn't, that these issues are divisive. I think he likes exactly how those issues play for him.
CTV political commentator Scott Reed, always great to chat, my friend. Have a great day.
There you go, right? I mean, is it going to fix it? Who knows? Are the tunnels going to be used and abused by crackheads? Yeah, likely. Absolutely. Like, something horrible is going to happen with the tunnels. But sure, give them the tunnels, man. Toronto's such a mess. There was once upon a time in my life where I thought I had to live in Toronto. When I lived in Toronto, I was like, this is the only place. This is the only place that exists. This is the best place in the world. You got everything. You got everything you need within walking distance, within driving distance. It's phenomenal. I love Toronto. And then I made the unfortunate, or I guess fortunate, depending what timeline we're talking about here, mistake or luxury of flying out west. I flew out west for the first time, like 2015 or 2016. I came to BC. And I was like, wow, you can actually sit in silence and not hear streetcars and sirens and horns, and there's an ocean? Huh. And you can go to the beach and it's not populated with a bunch of degenerate people like Lake Ontario is? Huh. This is kind of neat. And then I went back to Toronto. I was like, yeah, I'm not staying here. And I moved out west, and happily ever after, right? There you go. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to click the like button and subscribe to the channel. It does really help with the growth of the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.